What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to episode number 620 of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast, Hot Tags of the Week. I'm your host, as always, Tony Mango, flying solo for this edition because of a few different reasons I'll get into in a minute. Nothing, super crazy as far as Rob and Callum is concerned. It's more of a scheduling conflict than anything else. But before I get into any of that kind of stuff, I want to remind everybody the normal things to do here, which are to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me what you think about all the topics that I get into. Make sure that you're hitting the like button if you enjoy this. Also, if you want to help out on the monetary side of things, we have the Patreon, we have the YouTube channel membership. Click on the join button over there on YouTube. Double check that you are subscribed here right next to that, and the little notification bell is ringing. You got all your email alerts set up and stuff. There's also a little thanks button, and also if you want to pick up some merchandise, you can do that on Redbubble and TeePublic. Trying to get that out of the way real quick. I am flying solo for this edition because I have doctor's appointments that get in the way of all this. I'm actually recording this now before doing a sleep study. I'm going to have to be doing that tonight. I'm recording this at like 11 o'clock at night. And if anybody's been following the podcast for years, they know that I sleep horribly. And the idea of me doing any kind of a sleep study, it's kind of ridiculous. But on top of that, it's actually funny enough that they sent me a little thing to send to use at home rather than going somewhere for a sleep study. So I don't know, maybe that'll make that a little bit easier. But I do have to kind of speed along here and not have, an hour to 2 hour long edition of this, because I also couldn't record it at our normal time tomorrow, where we usually take care of that in the afternoon on Friday. And I've got Rob and Callum to join me, and we can really kind of do a deeper dive on this, because I have some other tests I have to do. I have to do a pulmonary function test tomorrow, right at the time that we would be doing that. So I can't really push that off. If you've been checking out the past couple of weeks, you know that I've been having breathing issues since pretty much No Mercy, and they haven't gotten any better. So I need to keep checking that up, and sometimes that conflicts with the recording times. So that was a full breath, though. That's pretty good. I wanted to make sure that I at least got something out here for the hot tags for you guys for this week, instead of being in a position where Friday passes and then the weekend, maybe not necessarily recording, and then the next thing it's Monday already, and then we pretty much have skipped a week. I thought about mixing the hot tags in with the fantasy booking that we did earlier this week, but that went pretty long, so I kind of scrapped that idea right then. I thought that we might get some time last night, and that didn't necessarily work, for at least Rob and I to do it. And I didn't reach out to Rob tonight. He probably would have joined me if I would have asked him to, but I know that he's taking care of some Ring of Honor stuff as well. So I figured I would I'd do this on my own for this edition, but I definitely do want to get these guys' opinions about some of these other things. And I apologize for not being one of those weeks where we have a lot more to talk about and a lot more back and forth conversation and stuff. Sometimes the hot takes are like that, though, and to be perfectly honest, there isn't a whole lot for me to talk about this week, so I kind of figured maybe this was one of those better weeks to make it a quicker episode. And hopefully, if anything changes with this stuff, we'll roll that into next week's and kind of double back and talk about these topics again. But I do want to talk about the Raw season premiere. I want to talk about the PWI Women's 250 list, the NWA getting a TV deal, a couple of other little things here and there. As I just said a second ago, there's not a whole lot going on. So it's not like this is one of those weeks where we got to break down, thankfully, like a bunch of releases or any huge shifts to the paradigm for WWE, or Tony Khan didn't do anything that was like really particularly interesting, and have a big Twitter rant or something. So I guess I'll just start getting into this with I guess I'll get into this with the main thing that I had as a takeaway from Dynamite, since I just mentioned Tony Khan. And that's Sting announcing that he is going to be retiring at AEW Revolution in 2024. This is the same pay-per-view that he had his first match in AEW. So that's, kind of some synchronicity there, and, kind of full circle in that kind of way. But it's more so, I guess he just figured now's the time, and maybe Full Gear is a little bit too soon. You know what I mean? Like, he's been wrestling for decades. I'm sure that there's a good portion of him that's like, man, I don't know if I really want to retire, but eventually you do have to. And, and we see everybody from Shawn Michaels to The Undertaker, Triple H, people that were able to wrestle for decades and decades, they eventually all do have to retire. I think at this point, when Sting retires, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the person that would be the most elder statesman in mainstream wrestling, WWE, AEW, Impact, etc., rather than, somebody does an indie show once a year or something. But I think that the person that would have been wrestling the longest is probably either Rey Mysterio or Dustin Rhodes. And I would think more Dustin. I think he's been wrestling longer than Rey. I don't know 100% for sure, but I'm pretty sure that Dustin would be. But, eventually he's going to have to retire as well. And Rey Mysterio just talked about how he's got another year and a half left, most likely. So we're not, going to get too many more feuds and matches out of Rey. But as far as Sting is concerned, he should at least have, he's going to have this one more match. I would assume he's probably going to have at least one or two more matches before that. Maybe he's going to wrestle at Full Gear. Maybe he's going to wrestle on Winter is Coming, or, just a regular episode of Dynamite, whatever it might be. I haven't heard anything about specifically the plans for this, but I've just assumed after, the amount of time that's gone by, that he's probably going to face Darby Allin. And given how long they've been partnered up in AEW and how many people realistically there are in AEW that could even have a match against Sting that would be worthwhile, to get invested in, as far as like, maybe he could have a good match with like a Brandon Cutler, or maybe he could have a good match with Jake Hager or whatever. But like, if you want Sting to wrestle just, 1 to 3, 5 at most matches left, you want to try to maximize that as much as you possibly can. So if I'm somebody who can control that, I am hoping that he has a match with Edge, and I'm hoping that he ends things with Darby Allin. Now, Darby Allin is somebody who, of course, is his teammate. So I know that a lot of people would be expecting that somebody would turn heel. I don't think that they're going to do that. I think that they're going to go with the idea of, this is my last match and I'm going to put you over on the way out, and you're kind of my little surrogate little brother in some ways, or son. He's old enough to be his father for sure. And that's how it would make sense to me. I mean, maybe they have something else in mind. Maybe he plans on having a match with MJF, for all we know. Or maybe he has somebody that's going to be coming in from out of AEW that he really wants to wrestle with. For all we know, Ric Flair or somebody is going to come and just have that match. It sounds crazy, but Ric Flair's had a match sooner than everybody else in Evolution. That's a weird statistic. So maybe there's something else in mind. But this sort of came out of the blue, since, we hadn't been hearing about him retiring leading up to this or anything. It was just sort of one of those things that was in the background. So it's not too shocking, but it is shocking a little bit to me that it's just happening at Revolution, instead of it being like, oh, you know what? I've got one more year left in me, and now I'm going to end it at Full Gear next year. Or maybe it's, even like All Out next year, or All In next year in front of the crowd at Wembley or something. That's what I'm thinking. And, of course, if anything changes with that or whatever, then we'll chime in. We'll get Rob's point of view. We'll get Callum's point of view, see if they have any other people in mind that they think would be a better final opponent for Sting. But that's kind of what makes sense to me. So, well deserved to go into his retirement. Sting is somebody who is an absolute legend, and somebody that I really wish WWE would have picked up way sooner, man. The feuds that he could have had, and not just like the Undertaker one, but like we could have gotten a real Triple H and Sting feud. We could have potentially gotten a Shawn Michaels and Sting feud. John Cena versus Sting, Batista. Like there's matches against great workers that maybe he wouldn't have necessarily had like a full-on feud with, but like, give me a younger Sting against a Dolph Ziggler, give me a younger Sting against Chad Gable or somebody like, they would end up having some really great matches. And it's good that he had this extra stint in AEW, so we got more out of Sting than if WWE would have just, like he ended up retiring in that way. But if now is when he wants to hang up the boots, well deserved. So as far as I mentioned a statistic earlier, and here's something that's just it's not really something to dive too deep into, but apparently they are checking to see if Natalya has this record of the most submission wins of any man or woman in WWE history. And apparently that's something that is very possible. She had said in something recently like, oh, even more than Brett. And then the more you think about it, yeah, Brett won a lot of matches through roll-ups or, small package or some kind of a, reversal into a pinfall rather than just always winning with the sharpshooter. And most of Natty's wins, she has not the best win-loss record in WWE history, but, most of her wins tend to be, she's wrestling on main event or she's on, one of those random times where they end up like, actually pushing her for quite a while. She'll win with a sharpshooter. She'll make somebody tap out. Looking at right now her win-loss percentages on a cage match, because it's a great resource. We always talk about how great they are. And the win-to-loss ratio that she has, it's not fantastic. Some years it's really bad. Some years she's got like, a record that's, hey, for somebody that's been around all the time, you're going to have ups and downs. Let's put it that way. But it looks like, most of the times that she wins by her sharpshooter. So it's a very good chance that she actually does have that record, which is pretty neat. And for somebody like Natty, who doesn't get the world championship as often, or doesn't tend to star in a lot of feuds that are like, these feud of the year type caliber things, it's something that she could hang her hat on. She's got the most matches, the most wins. She's got these records coming, out of left and right in her career. So she's well past future Hall of Famer. We already established that. But the more that you add on to that, the more that she really puts her mark on the pro wrestling business. So good for Natty. And I hope that they do something on TV that they really acknowledge that. That'd be pretty cool. I don't know why they wouldn't. It's not like there's any negative to boosting her value, right? It's not like it takes away from anybody else. Well, as far as boosted value goes, and the women's division, let's talk about that PWI Women's 250 list. And we've talked about this many different times. Every year this list comes out, and the men's list comes out and all those, and we always say the same sort of things. It's subjective. It's just a list for PWI. It's not like it's the end all be all of everything like that. But it is interesting to look at how a collective of people rate certain people and how our own perspectives may be different, and how, somebody like myself who doesn't watch things outside of WWE and AEW may be taken by surprise that somebody is really high up on the list that I've never heard of before, or somebody might be really low and I might be like, what's going on here? And I looked at this list, and number one is Rhea Ripley. And, for somebody who ranks her as like one of the top women that's ever been in the pro wrestling industry, and, she was my first pick on the women's mock draft that we just did, and she's somebody that, has well passed already the future Hall of Famer thing on top of what we just talked about with Natty. It is curious to me how they rank some of these things when Rhea's done more work just as like a manager for Judgment Day than she has actually participating in the ring. And I don't know if they have a weighted value of just like, well, but she did, and she is the champion, so it is what it is. or if they look at that as more like, well, she's in a position in WWE where, Roman Reigns, for instance, barely ever wrestles, barely ever even appears anymore. And he still needs to be towards the top because he's just the guy. If that's the case, then I understand it. Now, number 2 is Julia. I don't know anything about her. I've heard a lot of great things, but I've not watched anything of her. So to me, it's an unknown, but it makes sense based off of everybody talking about how great she is. Number 3 is Bianca Belair. I think that's well-deserved. Jamie Hayter's at number 4. I don't know if I'd rank her that high, but I can understand it. Tam Nakano, number 5. Again, don't know anything about her. Athena, number 6. She is really, kind of taken ROH under her control. Deonna Purrazzo, high up there is not surprising. Willow Nightingale being that high is a little surprising to me, considering that we have people that are way bigger names that are lower. But Willow's been having a great year, I mean, she is somebody who is working her way up that card, and she's long been somebody who has, is that the third time that I've said long been in this podcast already? Is that going to be my phrase for the day? She has been in that range of, being on the cusp of winning the ROH Women's World Championship, and she seems like she's probably going to be a future AEW Women's World Champion as well, and definitely somebody that has done a lot in the past year. Camille, number 9, Jordan Grace, number 10, Asuka, number 11. Not bad. I think she probably should have been in the top 10, but maybe there's justification for her being number 11 there. Toni Storm, number 12. And, we keep going down here. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but Jade Cargill was at 14. I think that makes sense. To, that's realistic. She's right above Roxanne Perez and Kyrie. Chris Statlander's around there at number 18. Charlotte's 21, Ronda Rousey's 22, Trinity's number 23, Io Sky's 24, Tiffany Stratton's 25. So these are all names that make sense to be in that top 25 in my mind. The biggest shocker for me, though, was Becky Lynch at number 29. For her to be that low is very interesting. I would have thought that she would have been closer to that top 10 range. Maybe not necessarily in the top 10. Maybe so, though. I could see a justification for that, but at least in that, 17 or something type of range. A lot of these names I don't know. Alex Windsor, I don't know. I don't know Flammer. I don't know Jody Threat. So I can't comment on any of these. And then a lot of the ones that I do actually know, I still haven't really been watching much of what they've done. Like Mercedes Martinez has mostly been in ROH, and I don't watch ROH, so I can't really talk about that. But it is interesting to me that even Cora Jade's 65 and Steph DeLander is 69. And I'm like, well, for Cora, all that she's done in NXT, she's only 3 spots up higher than Steph DeLander. What's Steph DeLander been doing? Not the, crap on Steph DeLander. I mean, I thought that Persia Perota had more that they shouldn't have necessarily just released her, but that is kind of shocking. And Ruby Soho's underneath her even more at 72. Zoe Stark's at number 75. I would have thought Zoe Stark would be higher than that. She's not that far off from Lady Frost, and Zoe's had a lot that she's been doing in the past year. So there are some shockers here. There are some people that seem like they may be off the list that maybe I would argue that maybe they should be at least on there, but I see that the final person is Yappy. I have no clue who Yappy is. A lot of these names. And actually the list that I'm looking at right now, AIPTcomics.com, doesn't even have the full list. 191 is just blank. 196 is blank. I see Damaris is on here, 199. I worked with Damaris for a little bit. That's pretty cool. Ivy Nile all the way down to 207. So I am curious what the rankings are as far as if you take out all the people that are, just have the WWE and the AEW list, then obviously that bumps a lot of people up on the list. But how they rank certain things, the criteria, it's, they say on there the win-loss record, the championships, the feuds, all that. But I wonder where they rank some of those things, because the win-loss record, is that the most important, or is their overall star power the most important? And then you start getting into the argument of everything. Like, people talk about like, oh, who's the greatest wrestler of all time? Some people say, well, that's, like a Kurt Angle type. And they talk about his in-ring athleticism. And then other people go, oh, it's Hulk Hogan or it's Stone Cold Steve Austin because they're the biggest draws. So that means they're the greatest wrestler of all time. Is it Shawn Michaels who's the greatest wrestler because you think that he is the best in the ring? Or is it The Rock because he's the most popular? It's interesting to see how people rank those things. And that's why, we don't do that in the Smarkies for the end of the year awards, but we do have the best and the worst categories. So that way we can kind of give you a full range of how we perceive each one of these topics. And, when we talk about like best in-ring work, and then we talk about worst in-ring work, we talk about the differences between those two, rather than to just be like, all right, the full ranking for WWE is this, the full ranking for AEW is that. But that's something we might explore that in the future. Maybe we do like a giant top rope list. I don't know. Let me know if you think that that's worth exploring. So let's bounce to another topic here. Let's go into NWA as far as the idea of, me not knowing some of these people on here. I know who Camille is, but I haven't seen more than like 3 of her matches, for instance. But they are apparently getting a network television deal with the CW network in particular. I should probably rephrase that. It's not network television in the same sense of like NBC, ABC, Fox, the true network television networks. But CW is Cable One, and that's a network. Shut up. So they are coming to the CW network, which is a big get for them. It's going to be both NWA Powerrr and a reality show. Now, what's interesting to me about this is that CW is not at all a network that would cater to this audience. If you've not watched CW for, we're talking decades, really, probably, since the beginning of this, because mostly it came out of the WB. They have a very specific target audience for most of their shows. It's the teen type of PG-13, not quite into the rated R, but we're going to try to be a little steamy with a lot of models that we hire for all of our TV shows. And, if you are a superhero fan, then you might have watched Smallville or The Flash or Arrow or any of those. You can tell that that's the same CW vibe as a show like Supernatural or the vampire one. I don't know. I think it's called The Vampire Diaries, but it might not be. And I've never really watched most of these shows. There's a show called like the 1000, or maybe it's the 100, or maybe it's the 10,000. I don't know. It's one number of maybe it's the 10. No, I'm pretty sure it's the 1000. Or the one, it's whatever. You know what I mean? These shows have a very specific vibe to them. And then they do reruns of a lot of other shows. So, Family Guy reruns or something. Well, pro wrestling's never been like a market for that. And for them to go with NWA Powerrr in particular, CW is more of a progressive, liberal type of a network. And NWA isn't, trying to say screw the liberal audience, but they do kind of strike me as more of a conservative pro wrestling audience, at least from the bits and pieces that I've seen here and there. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but that's something that's interesting to me, because I would have thought that would have been through some kind of a Fox related thing. FS1 has the SmackDown stuff, so they can't really do that, but maybe there would be something of another kind. I don't know if there's maybe an exclusive deal, but because maybe WWE has that in place, but maybe they don't. Maybe there is something to the idea that they could have gone to FS1 or Fox or something. But nevertheless, NWA Powerrr being on a big network like that is really huge for them, especially because they were on YouTube all this time. Now, the reality show, I don't think is going to be making a whole lot of waves. Reality shows with these pro wrestling things, they always suck. And it's a shame because the reality shows could be really good, but you are kind of in a catch-22 situation. If you make it too much like a show that I would watch, where I am a pro wrestling fan, I like sports entertainment, I want to know more about it, and that's why I have my own podcast and I have my own website and everything. I want to know the reality behind the show. I want a reality show to be a reality show. But most people, mainstream type of audience that you would want to get the ratings, because there's not many people like me around, in more ways than one, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But you want to try to get the mainstream appeal. And to get the mainstream appeal for a reality show, you need to ham it up. And you start doing bookings of things. You start making it to where, well, in this episode, there's this drama about this relationship where this person is like having some kind of issues with their career and they're wondering if they can, they're going to get into an argument backstage or whatever. And then it loses all of the reality and it becomes more of a show than a reality show. And then the next thing you know, you're basically watching another pro wrestling program because it's just the backstage vignettes. So I would not be interested in checking out an NWA Powerrr reality show unless it was actually, let's show you what we're doing. And then I actually might check it out. But I am anticipating that that's not remotely close to what they're going to get. For that matter, if anybody's wondering, it's not just me crapping on NWA. I thought that the Rhodes, what was it called? The Cody Rhodes and Brady Rhodes show, Rhodes to the Top was the name of it. Maybe it was the 1000. I watched 2 episodes of that and I was like, no, can't quite get into that. I had watched some of that AEW show with like Adam Cole and Britt Baker and I couldn't get into that. I tried to watch Total Divas for a few seasons and I just hated it. Total Bellas I hated too. I watched that for like 3 episodes maybe or something and then I was just like that. I tapped out. I can't. Miss and Mrs. I think I've watched like maybe 3-4 episodes in total. Can't watch that show. Reality shows aren't my thing. And hopefully they get enough of an audience that this means something to them. But at the very least, even if it's just the NWA Powerrr, they're going to get a lot more eyes on that than on YouTube. I mean, it's weird because technically YouTube, anybody can watch it and it's totally free. But you got to go looking for it to find it on there. Whereas on CW, somebody can be watching the rerun of Riverdale, for instance. And then they could see an advertisement for NWA Powerrr is coming up and whatever. Then they can be like, I'll stick around and watch that show. So I think this is a really good thing for them. Good for NWA. Still think that they should merge. Hashtag urge to merge. Still a thing. So actually, I'm on my final hot tag already. And that is to talk about NXT and the Raw season premiere. Now, NXT Mania, as some people thought that it was called, or Trick or Treat, was that. But the Raw season premiere, quote unquote, prior to that is something that I was very underwhelmed by. I gotta be honest. This did not feel like it was a special show in the same way that it should be. If they're going to go for this season premiere type of thing, I thought that SmackDown ended up being a better show. So there were elements of this that I do not remember in the slightest bit. Like, I cannot tell you anything that happened in that Natalya match. I can't tell you pretty much almost anything about that Ricochet and Shinsuke Nakamura Falls Count Anywhere match. And they're 2 guys that I like a lot, and I love Falls Count Anywhere as like a gimmick for television shows. I don't know why Ludwig Kaiser beat Johnny Gargano. It's kind of interesting to me that they just gave him a setback like that, but they seem hell-bent on this idea of Imperium infighting. I don't like it, but they're doing it. Sami Zayn seems to be lining up for a feud with Drew McIntyre. But Drew McIntyre is still feuding with Seth Rollins in the meantime, so the whole future of Sami Zayn saying that he is a future world champion, he's got that, he's that level of a performer. I think that there would be a tough time for me to argue that Sami Zayn should be the next champion, but I would find it very difficult to not agree with the idea of Sami Zayn should definitely win that world title at some point. Sami Zayn is the type of guy that I still think if they would have wanted to go with the idea of Sami beating Roman, it could have worked. I think that Cody's the better option for it, but Sami could have worked. And now that they have this other world title, please give it to him at some point. Let him check that off his list. Give him, even if it's a 2-month title reign, a 3-month title reign, something like that. Jinder Mahal's been champion. Great Khali's been champion. Multiple people have won this belt that don't really need to be on that level. And Sami Zayn is somebody that I really hope that they give that belt to at some point. So I wouldn't be opposed to Drew McIntyre beating Seth Rollins for this, and then Sami Zayn beating Drew McIntyre. Like, we keep talking about this idea that Sami Zayn could be dropping the belt to Gunther at Mania. What if Gunther's still the Intercontinental Champion? Then what? Who do you have up against Seth Rollins? Well, if you can't get CM Punk, I don't know if you really have a good option. So I would be super cool with the idea of Drew McIntyre wins that World Heavyweight Championship, and then he comes back around to feuding with Sami Zayn, and we get Sami Zayn versus Drew McIntyre in a, beat the crap out of each other with their skill set WrestleMania opening match. Because I don't think it would main event the first night. They probably have one of the women's matches the first night, and then Roman Reigns night 2. Open up the first night with that? Blow the roof off the place. It'd be great. And then you could have Gunther defend the Intercontinental Championship against Brock Lesnar. If you don't have Brock against Logan Paul. If you don't have Brock against Logan Paul and you can do Brock against Gunther and you got somebody else for Logan Paul, can you get John Cena? That would be pretty great. If you can't do that, can you get CM Punk for that? That would be pretty interesting. What else happened on Raw? And there was the setup of the whole thing with Rhea Ripley and Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark, Shayna, Nia, and Raquel are all going to face Rhea Ripley at Crown Jewel. I think this might be the most amount of women that are performing on that show at one time. So that's pretty cool. As far as that goes, we'll get into our predictions for Crown Jewel closer to that event, but I'm just going to say right now, Rhea Ripley's most likely going to retain. Gunther retained the Intercontinental Championship over Bronson Reed. I was surprised that they even did this match because, heel versus heel, but it was fun to watch those two throw each other around and Gunther get a power bomb off of that. That was pretty cool. And we got new tag team champions in the sense that we have the old tag team champions. Judgment Day beat Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso to win the titles, which I don't really love because then that's just sort of, you did the Cody and Jey thing just for the sake of getting people to talk at Fastlane. Nothing came about from it. They didn't split the belts. Neither one of them got switched over to SmackDown where they would need to be like, I'm going to take the SmackDown championships over and do that. Then give them new championship belts to just make it unified or just update those awful designs or anything. So now we're back to exactly where we were before, with the idea in mind that I still think that there is a chance that Damian Priest breaks away from the Judgment Day, and maybe that's how we get the split. Maybe he goes over to SmackDown. Maybe we get something like he brings Dominic Mysterio over there, and then, I don't know. You gotta keep Dom and Rhea together, but JD is totally anti Damian Priest. So maybe the Judgment Day just ends up booting Damian Priest, and Priest goes off on his own. I don't know. But we're long past due the idea of getting these new championship belts or splitting them or whatever it might be. I wish that was the case. It didn't feel like it was a great season premiere to me, though. I know that was the big hook, was the title change. But also on top of that, Jimmy can just go over to Raw. He can just interfere. And this is another instance of just, why do we have a brand split if everybody can just switch around anytime that they want? I think it's pretty stupid. So rounding this out, let's go into the NXT results. where the Bada Bing Bada Boom Battle Royal was won by Chase University, which was a surprise to me. I thought that we were going to go with either Out the Mud or Los Lotharios. So we're going to get Andre Chase and Duke Hudson up against Tony D'Angelo and Channing Stacks Lorenzo next week for the first night of Halloween Havoc. And I'll go ahead and I'll put Halloween Havoc predictions in here while I'm at it too, because we might as well talk about that while we're doing this. But that was the opener of that. Battle Royals are fun, so I enjoyed that. We got another first round women's breakout tournament match where, trying to get a breath in there, didn't get a full one. Carmen Petrovich defeated Jada Parker. It was the first look at the both of them. I had not seen Petrovich or Parker. I don't know if Parker actually was on Level Up. I have not seen any of Petrovich's matches on Level Up, and they had, they're learning. They're not all sorted out yet, but there are some positives that I can see there. So I still think that they put them on television a little bit sooner than they need to for a lot of these women in particular, some of the men too. But a lot of the women tend to have a little bit less experience, so it's harder for them. And then you get somebody like a Roxanne, and Roxanne's just, she's been wrestling for a while, so she immediately takes to it and she's great. But the Ariana Grace match that was up against Brinley Reese instead of Jakar Jackson, I'm wondering if Jakar is actually injured. Wouldn't shock me if they just decided that they didn't want to have two heels up against each other and they had announced Jakar in that spot, and then they decided, well, we got to pull her in some way. So I'm surprised that they didn't go with Kaya Saint. She's been wrestling more on Level Up, and Brinley Reese hasn't. She even apparently used Sol Ruka's gear. So to put her in that spot is very interesting. And that's like one of those little stupid stories that is not going to be something that we have to, hear a lot about. Probably nobody even thinks about, but I would be interested in knowing their thought process behind that. Why did you go with this Brinley Reese girl if she's way less experienced than some of the others? It's interesting. Lyra Vicaria beat Tegan Knox. Shotzi beat Kiana James. There was a whole thing with Trick Williams being inserted into the number one contenders match and then being attacked. Of course, you're supposed to assume that it's Carmelo Hayes. I'm going to say that it's not. I think that they're going to say next week or the week after or however long they want to drag that confusion out. I think they're going to end up saying that it was somebody like a Braun Breaker. Maybe it was Dijak, maybe it was Baron Corbin. Maybe they just start a brand new feud with somebody else and it's Joe Gacy, for instance. But I think it's a little soon for them to do the Carmelo Hayes attacked him to do that thing. Brian Pillman Jr. is going to debut next week. And when we have our lineup for some of these other things, the spin the wheel, make a deal set up. So we know we've got some matches for that. Carmelo Hayes won that triple threat match, so he has been set up for that number one contender spot. And it seems like Akira Tozawa is going to be having some kind of a match with Noam Darm. What did I give him an M there? With Noam Dar for the Heritage Cup, potentially as part of Halloween Havoc. But at least right now, this is what Halloween Havoc says, that it's got the lineup. Becky Lynch against Lyra Valkyria. Fully expect Becky Lynch to retain. The Family defending the tag titles against Chase University. I expect the Family to retain. We got a lights out match between Blair Davenport and Gigi Dolan. I don't know what the difference between a lights out match and a Devil's Playground match is, because they seem like they're both just hardcore matches. So at least when it comes to Davenport and Dolan, I think it's going to be Davenport. I think that Roxanne Perez is going to beat Kiana James in the Devil's Playground match. In the women's breakout tournament semifinals, I'm going to go with Lola Vice beating Carmen Petrovich and Kehlani Jordan beating Ariana Grace. I think the finals, we're going to get Kehlani against Lola, and then Lola is going to win. But, wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world if Ariana won. I just don't think that she's going to win over Lola. Lexis King is going to make his debut, Brian Pillman Jr. Who his opponent is, we don't know yet. He's probably going to win. And Mr. Stone is going to go up against Braun Breaker, which is interesting. We have not really seen him get into the ring. We know that he can because he's Robbie E. That's pretty cool. We also are going to have the finals when it comes down to week 2 of that women's breakout tournament. Again, I already mentioned, I think Lola Vice is going to win that. And Carmelo Hayes is going to go up against Ilya Dragunov. And I expect Dragunov to retain there. Whether it has something to do with Trick or not remains to be seen what they do next week. But I don't think we're going to see Trick like turn on him or anything. That seems a little odd for him to turn heel, you know? So Halloween Havoc is a 2-week thing instead of a pay-per-view. And we aren't going to be doing a dedicated setup for that the way that we normally do for the pay-per-view points. But I will try to get their opinions about, you know, future ideas of, you know, maybe if we get a chance around the time prior to NXT to do something like with maybe a dark cast, I'm going to try to get their predictions for Rob and Callum. If not, then we'll talk about it on the next week. We'll talk about the, you know, predictions for week 2 of that. But the hot tags that I got written down are done. And I want to thank everybody for all their support. I want to thank them for listening to this episode. I want to remind you about following and liking and sharing all that stuff on Smark Moment, as well as fanboysanonymous.com. If you don't know what Fanboys is about and you're brand new to this whole thing, go to the website and check it out. It's pretty self-explanatory. That's the geek culture website that I have where I take care of all the things like movie reviews and stuff. And you can find things like the Blueprint Project over there, where you can get into deeper stuff like the Power Rangers epic that I've got, which is called Mighty Morphin Power, Absolute Power Rangers, a Mighty Morphin epic, and something like the Batman A Nighttime Story, 100 records from the Wayne Foundation archives. And there are so many more things on the Blueprint. I am constantly adding stuff to that. I am constantly adding Superman notes, like Star Wars notes, X-Men notes, you know, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I keep actually adding even more blueprints. Like I've got names for an Ant-Man blueprint, which is like, I'm not the biggest Ant-Man fan in the world, but the more that I thought about it, the more that I was like, well, you know, I'm going to get the group of people, and the group of them I'm going to call the Ant Colony, kind of like the Bat Family and all. And I even have a name for that, most likely, which is called One Size Fits All, the Ant-Man epic. And the Flash has the On the Run of Your Life, a Flash epic is that name. Still a big fan of Web of Lives, the Spider-Man epic. I wish I had a PlayStation and I could try to play Spider-Man 2, but if you're into superheroes and stuff, you definitely have to check out a future episode that we're going to be doing here, DC versus Marvel Survivor Series. And I am actually potentially adding even more to that. I said before already that it's going to be one video on Smark Moment, one video on Fanboys Anonymous, but I thought about it and I might have more. It's kind of crazy because I already have like 70 matches or something, but I'm like, what if I do another variation of it? What if I do one where I treat it as if it's War Games? And instead of doing Survivor Series, Raw versus SmackDown, DC versus Marvel, what if I do DC versus Marvel, the War Games matches? And I just have, you know, the men's War Games match, the women's War Games match. And then I started to work on that. And then I thought to myself, well, what if I do something else? And I was like, well, what if I have 3 men's War Games matches and 3 women's War Games matches? And I keep them on power levels. And I do the street level ones. So people like Batman and Daredevil and Black Canary and Green Arrow and Black Widow and Hawkeye, that kind of thing. And then I do the gods and cosmic side of it. So I have like Superman and Silver Surfer and the Sentry and Hyperion and, you know, these like massively powerful characters, Thor, Shazam, and so on and so forth. And then what if I do the monsters and magic? So I have Ghost Rider and I have Etrigan the Demon and, you know, Raven and over on the women's side and Scarlet Witch over on that side. So we might end up making this 5 or 6 or 7 videos instead of 2. You know, when I start getting on these things, some of them, they just consume me. And with this and everything else, you can find everything under amangotree.com or anthonymango.com. It's the same website, all redirects to my link tree that I have up over there. So go there, like, follow, share, favorite, subscribe, all that stuff, including Tony Mango on Twitter and Facebook and Letterboxd and whatnot. And make sure you're following Rob and Callum. They weren't on this one, but Wigmeister14, Dude Felice, check them out. Stay tuned for whatever updates we got coming up next. I don't know what it's going to be. What the next thing is going to be recording is really kind of up in the air. It might be the Darkcast. I do want to make sure that I get that in sometime over the next few days or so. So we'll see how much I can try to record. Maybe if I could try to record something on the weekend. Also, we got next week the Mount Rushmore of spooky characters in pro wrestling, or scariest wrestlers, whatever we're going to call it. I haven't quite decided yet. But we're going to take care of those two things first. We're going to have another episode of the Hot Tags. And then we're going to actually come back around with some of these pay-per-view things. We got Crown Jewel coming up at the beginning of the month. So that's going to be around November 1st. We're going to start getting into that. So, Thanksgiving around the corner. We got Champsgiving that I'm going to try to get into. I haven't quite decided yet what to do with that. But one of the Darkcast ideas that I have right now is for us to settle on a Champsgiving theme. I put something up on the Facebook group, and it seems like the last time I checked, most people were voting that they would most like to have a round of tag teams that never won the WWE Tag Team Championship. So we might do that. Rob Callum and I might sit down and discuss what teams should be on the bracket or something. And I also have been giving a little bit of thought to the redo of the Women's Evolution stuff that we just did, where maybe I try to group them together the way that Callum did, or try to approach it as like its own separate company, like what Rob did. Haven't had a chance to work on it too much, but maybe that's going to be a part of a Darkcast. Maybe we're going to just shooting the shit and seeing what happens. But if you are part of the Darkcast here, and you're going back and checking out the other episodes and stuff, another one of them's coming your way. So that might be first, maybe the Mount Rushmore, whatever it is. Make sure you are subscribed here. Make sure you keep checking smarkoutmoment.com, Facebook and Twitter at smarkoutmoment. And whatever the next one is that we see you, I hope to see you there. That's the whole point, right? That's stupid of me. Anyway, that's going to be the end for this episode of the Hot Tags. Thanks again for listening, everybody. And I will see you next time, assuming that that's the case, because it's stupid of me. But adios for now. This has been another Smark Out moment, and I am being counted out.